Hello, hello, namaste.
Oh, namaste. Hi, Ruchira. I am so excited to have my second conversation about disentangling patriarchy with you because I've known you for a long time and I'm very excited to have this conversation. And I'm honored, and I'm going to introduce you now. We've known each other for a long time, but here is the official introduction.
Okay.
I'm reading it, so here goes. Ruchira Gupta is a social justice activist, a feminist campaigner, and a journalist. She's a professor at New York University and a distinguished scholar at the University of California, Berkeley. Ruchira is the founder of Apne Aap, which is a grassroots organization that empowers marginalized girls and women to resist and end sex trafficking. Over the last 20 years, almost 20 years, she has helped over 20,000 girls, prostituted girls, women, and their families living in red light districts to help themselves and to transform their lives. For over 3 decades, Ruchira has been campaigning and working for a world where no girl or woman is bought or sold. She has helped in the introduction and shaping of anti-trafficking policies and laws across the globe, including India, the Indian anti-sex trafficking law, which is really important. She participated in discussions that led to the passage of the UN Protocol to End Human Trafficking, particularly women and children's trafficking. Oopsie, phone is ringing. Sorry, technical issue.
Yes.
Uh, sorry. Um,
Somebody's trying to click on the link to get in.
yeah,
That's why.
okay. She spoke at the French Assembly, the Icelandic Parliament, the South African Parliament, the Indian Parliament uh, for survivor-friendly laws.
Even the US Senate and the
And the US
Congress.
Senate. Okay, good. Like you chiming in. She has edited As If Women Matter, an anthology of Gloria Steinem's essays, and written manuals on human trafficking for the UN Office for Drugs and Crime. Her awards include the French Chevalier de Légion d'Honneur and the Clinton Global Citizens Award. Her documentary, The Selling of Innocence on Trafficking of Girls from Nepal to India, won an Emmy for investigative journalism. I met Ruchira about 10 years, I think, at CGI after she had won the Clinton Global Award. And she was talking about a project which was really, it's one of the things she does, and it's called The Last Girl. I'm going to tell you a little bit, and that's the first thing we're going to discuss. And then we're going to move on to Ruchira's new book. So just a little introduction about The Last Girl, and I'll give you a little introduction to the book, and then we'll get to Ruchira. So The Last Girl is a 13-year-old in a brothel, or the 15-year-old girl standing in a street corner. She is poor, female, and young. Her intersecting inequalities cut off her access to food, clothing, shelter, education, and even legal protection. She is the most vulnerable of all human beings to sexual exploitation, and traffickers prey on her vulnerabilities to recruit and pimp her. Each year, 1.4 million girls are sold into sex trafficking. And I think Ruchira can go on to this. It's like one of the second or third largest.
Second largest now. It's crossed the drug trade in the kind of money it generates for organized criminal networks because drugs are consumed once.
Arms first, then girls, then drugs.
Yes. And it's billions of dollars because, girls can be consumed again and again.
Right. Whereas drugs, you do it once and
It's
yeah.
finished.
Okay, so all over the world and throughout history, the most discriminated and marginalized communities are overrepresented in prostitution and sexual exploitation. This is an important line that Ruchira wrote that's important to me. Prostitution is a gendered and patriarchal system that disproportionately affects the poorest women and children, whether they are Dalit women and girls in India, Indigenous communities in Canada, African American women in the United States, rural areas in Mongolia, as refugees, migrants, victims of sexual violence, or belonging to ethnic minority. They are all the first victims of economic sexual exploitation by pimps, traffickers, and sex buyers. The last girls are those forgotten women and girls exploited by the prostitution system. And I really want to talk about it being a system, and victims of all the disparities it perpetuates. They are the ones who are at the intersection of all systems. Again, we're at the systems, the patriarchal systems of domination and forms of discrimination such as racism, sexism, class, capitalism, and imperialism. These inequalities reinforce their marginalization and restrict their access to the most basic rights, including the right to dignity, food, water, housing, health, and education. And The Last Girl, you can talk about where that name comes from. we're going to discuss that, but just to get this introduction in, Ruchira has a new book which is coming out. It's her first novel, and it's a young adult novel. She can show it. It's coming out next Wednesday, I believe. Correct?
Yes, and you're going to be here at the Brooklyn Greenlight Flatbush bookstore.
Okay, and it's called I Kick and I Fly, and it's published by Scholastic, and they're getting the book out to schools and libraries. And it's a story, well, you'll talk about it later, about a girl in Bihar who escapes being sold into the sex trade when a local hostel owner helps her to understand the value of her body through Kung Fu. And I'm just going to read you two little reviews about it, and then we'll move on. I have not read the book. I haven't gotten it yet. I'm getting it next week, but I'm sure it's great. But here's what Gloria Steinem said. In I Kick and I Fly, Ruchira Gupta has given young readers an irresistible story, and also one that could save lives. The book is a gift. And then we have Alice Walker, who says, any work from Ruchira Gupta is sure to further the cause of liberating women, especially in this novel, girls. It takes a strong belief in us, and especially in our young ones, to persevere as she does in both art and politics. The absolute belief that if the heart is moved, so might be the positive activities for justice and freedom of the mind. Okay, so Ruchira, first question is, can you talk about The Last Girl and who she is and how that connects to patriarchal oppression and racism and everything?
To me, the last girl is the most vulnerable of all human beings, and that's why I call her the last. The idea of the last, of course, is taken from John Ruskin, who wrote a book called Unto the Last, and he got it from the Bible, where it says, the last shall not be the least. And then Gandhi used the concept of the last after reading John Ruskin's Unto the Last, that every state, every government, every country should create a system which reaches the last in all its welfare and entitlements. So Gandhi dreamed of that India, the India that would be independent, where every last person would be included. And he always said that for him, any action was useless if it did not have a positive impact on the last person. So as a journalist, when I was wandering through the hills of Nepal, and I came across rows of villages with missing girls, and I asked the people sitting there where the girls were. They told me all in Bombay, and I followed the trail, and I found these little girls locked up in small brothels in Bombay with iron bars on the window, one little door at the exit, being literally raped by 8 or 10 men every night for 30 cents, 40 cents. And it was like a whole system, like a factory operation, but of human beings, not of products. And I began to see that this was the last. I had never seen anything as vulnerable, as marginalized, as squashed as when I met these girls in these brothels in Bombay. So to me, she began to represent the last girl. And I ended up making a documentary on the subject called The Selling of Innocence. And you've already said I won an Emmy for it. But when I was in New York in the Broadway Marquis Hotel and everyone was applauding and there were the bright lights and I was on stage, when I looked at the audience, I could see beyond them the eyes of the women in the brothels pleading for the last girls, the mothers, who said that whatever has happened to us has happened, but give a different future for our children. And so, I shook hands with everyone. And in that moment, I decided that I would use my Emmy not to further my career as a documentarian, but to make a difference in the world for the last girl. And so I just went back to the brothels of Bombay, sat on a straw mat with the women, and I told them that I said, I'm here and I want to do more. And the women then said, let's form an organization. We want to educate our daughters. And that's how, I began working for the last girl. And I began to realize that the last girl is really the last, not because of something that is in her DNA. She is the last because of systems of oppression and hierarchy, which cut her off from her very basic needs: food, clothing, shelter, sometimes even legal protection. And why is she cut off from those things? It's not that those things don't exist. They exist in the very society she lives in. But all these false hierarchies are created in all our societies. So
Can you go through them, cast? Can you list them?
yes, as we've discussed before, that hierarchy is created by somebody who'll say, oh, you are less important than me because you're black, or you are less important than me because you're a Dalit, you are less important than me because you're from a nomadic tribe, or you're female, or you're a girl. And these girls had all these intersecting inequalities on them from the time they were born. They were poor, they were female, they were low caste, which is like, in America, they would be of marginalized races and ethnicities. And on top of that, they were teenagers, so they were not allowed to take any decisions for themselves: who to marry, when to marry, whether to go to school, not go to school, even when to have a baby. They could not take any decision for themselves. So they are the last girls. And of course, traffickers knew, here are these unskilled, hungry kids, we can prey upon them. So they would go and say, I'll give you $100, $150, and come to the brothels with me. And the girls would go, sometimes knowing what it was about, sometimes not knowing what
Very,
what it.
very young. A lot of these girls, very, very children. I mean,
Absolutely.
nine.
Jill, you've been to my NGO several times in India. You spent a day, I remember, with one girl from one such nomadic tribe in Delhi. And you called me after spending a day with her, and you said, she had a bag full of just trash. And she was so proud of it because it was full of something. And
Her purse. She was probably 9 years old and she was with my daughter. And she was so happy she had a purse. And we're like, what's inside your purse? And it was trash. And she was so happy that she had this trash. But I mean, to see this girl who was really a child, I mean, a child, and that was what she did, many times every day. She would be sent out by her pimps to traffic and then come home at night and be a child.
exactly. And so when we talk about intersecting inequalities, we have to understand that this means absence of choice. It's not a choice, because there's a big debate about choice and choicelessness, and a survival strategy is not a real choice.
Yeah. Exactly. So you started working with with this, you started helping the girls. Can you explain a little bit how it is that your approach? I know personally it's very holistic. Like part of that is convincing their families to let them go to school. A lot of their families don't want them to go to school. Can you explain how that works and other choices that, it involves, it's a holistic practice and it's a long practice to get these girls out of sex trafficking. Do you want to explain a little bit how that happens?
Yeah, so Jill, basically, as you know, because you've visited and you've talked to me so much and read all our literature, is that I've seen this last girl everywhere. In America, where I live in New York, or in India, or in Europe, or Africa, where I travel, or Latin America. And I want to do something about her, but I really believe that anything that I do has to begin from the last and change the top, like a tree. So, like a tree grows with roots inside the ground and then grows up into this strong tree which gives fruit and shade. So my work also, I wanted to, of course, change the entire system, change the laws. And I went to the UN and to the US Senate as you introduced me, and I said, law, law, law. But I also wanted to work girl by girl, besides law by law. And therefore, I went deep into this community in the poorest village of the poorest state in Bihar. And I decided that I would organize the community to bring about the change that it really wanted to see but didn't know how. And so one of the things which I realized that I could rest my program on to organize the community to get out of this trap of intergenerational exploitation, poverty, and prostitution was that, the love of the mothers for their daughters, because that it has such strong power. And the mothers were willing to take on the traffickers and their husbands who were pimps and be beaten up. But they said, we want to send our daughters to school, come what may. So I thought that this is the way I can do what I want to do. First of all, I will prevent a girl from being prostituted or sex trafficked if she goes to school. The second thing is that as the women fight for their daughters, they will learn to fight for themselves too. So
Many of these mothers are very young. Let's be clear too. They're a little bit more than girls, but many of them are very, very. You want to explain how sometimes in these families they're married off and they have a child before they.
Yeah. So, very often what happens is that a girl is considered a resource in these families where there is intergenerational prostitution. So as soon as a girl is born, she can be sold. People begin grooming her. That when she attains puberty, when she's 12 or 13, she can be sold and the family will get money. So, and within 2 or 3 years,
Explain. They get sold at 5 or 6. They get sold and they don't move into their husband's families. It's an arranged marriage, which is practice that happens.
12 or 13, yeah. And then what happens is that, within 2 or 3 years, they have babies and they haven't given birth to themselves fully before they have to give birth to other babies. And so the difference between a mother and a daughter could be as little as 14 years, 15 years, not much, So a 25-year-old could end up having like a child and, having to see her be sold. And so it's really, really hard to watch that. And, there are rituals around a girl being sold into prostitution in such communities. So the girl is married to a banana tree. And then, she is told that now her husband is the banana tree. So she now can have sex with the men that she's sold to. And the first customer who buys her takes off her nose ring. It's described in my book, in fact, I Kick and I Fly, that I've just written.
Okay.
I've described this ritual. And my hero, Hira, her name is Hira, which means diamond in Hindi, and she's a diamond in the dust, right? She's a street fighter. Her mother wants her to go to school, but she can't stay on in school because she's bullied. She's too hungry to focus on lessons, and everybody teases her that you come from the red light area. And she's expelled when she kicks the teeth of a class bully. So she has no control over her impulses, and she just knows how to fight. And when she's expelled, she knows that there's no food at home. School was the only place she would get her one meal a day, and she knows her days are numbered. So she doesn't know how to fight anymore. And she's going to be sold into prostitution when the annual cattle fair comes into town, because along with cattle in this community, girls are sold, and they're sold by first being.
That's actually true. They're sold with cattle at a market.
Yeah.
Wow.
In Bihar, in Rajasthan, and there are whole rituals around it. So first the girl will be married to a banana tree, then there will be a big feast, then the man, her first customer, will provide money to the family for the feast and extra money, saris and other things for the family, a sack of rice, plus a nose ring of gold for the girl. And the first person who takes off the nose ring of the girl is the man who rapes her. So the ceremony is really called, in translation, the taking off of the nose ring, Nathutarna.
So it's really
that's how it happens. And then in these fairs, there are little, then the girl belongs to this man. He sells her onto an orchestra party in these fairs. And they're called orchestra parties.
What is that?
Basically, they're like there are poles and girls dance in these fairs inside tents. Oh. And then they have numbers attached to them, and men pick them up and then take them behind the tent. And
the young girl who just got married, after that's like her wedding night, or after her wedding night?
The next day after her wedding night, yeah.
She's taken to like a oh my God.
And then
already to she'll have a lot of customers that night?
That night there's only one customer, but then over the next 3 or 4 years it just increases, and she has to go with the cattle fair as it travels from city to city across the country. And
as a thing that part of
the traveling carnival. Yeah, it's a traveling carnival with brothels and animals.
It still goes on.
It still happens, except in the place where I work, because when I began working there were 72 brothels. And with the work that I did, which you asked me about, that how did I began with community organizing. So I organized the mothers in a mothers group and got them to fight with their husbands and the pimps and the traffickers. I provided a safe space for them to meet with legal support and food, which was very essential, and help with homework for the girls. Started my own school to get the kids into school, and fought off the traffickers, literally death threats, knives pulled out on us, everything.
And I know you did not have much help from the police and the
No, no.
currency.
They in fact they used to harass us because we were cutting off their payoffs, right? They used to take payoffs from the brothel managers and
Oh,
the
you're all involved, yeah.
and so we did it on the strength of the community because the women resolved and I provided the support they needed, the legal support, the skill training support, the school support, all that they needed, food support. And, over a period of 20 years, we just stuck it out. There was food in our community center every day. There were teachers in our community center every day, come what may. And the women could meet there, decide what they wanted to do. We got them IDs, we got them to speak to authorities, march in processions, fight for their rights, which were really basic needs, and keep their girls in school. And one of the pivotal moments in organizing this community was a sense of dignity and pride. And you know how I got that? Was that, when the traffickers would try to stop us, they would steal things from our office, they would beat up the women, they would try to kidnap the girls. We had to make the wall of our hostel higher. And so I would think that, even if these traffickers are kidnapping our girls, what if they can just kick a few of them, in the process? Like they should not just cave in, they should hit back. So I want to teach them how to fight. And I found a karate teacher, and he
In
and
Bahama,
she
in Bahar.
in Bihar, in this small village, who was inspired by Bruce Lee. And so I got this man and woman, to start teaching the kids karate. And there they were in their white uniforms, and that gave them a sense of pride, their white uniform. Then, that they were breaking burning tiles, and they were, chopping and kicking and all of that. And then we decided to enter them into competitions. And when the first girl won a gold medal in a karate competition, everything changed in the community.
Really? Wow, yeah.
Because in school they could never compete as much as the other kids,
Right.
right? They were first generation learners.
Yeah.
But something with the body, and because they came from a nomadic tribe, they were agile, they knew how to walk tight ropes and things. They were so good at karate. And
And
so
so
I began
your
to
book,
write the story.
it's based on a true story of
It's
a.
based on many true stories, yeah.
She did come to the States. Do you want to tell a little about the book now, about what happens in the book? And because I want to say one thing that which is one of the quotes about the book is that you obviously, first of all, it's your first novel and you decided to write a novel um, for young people, which I think is important. And before this, you also did a comic book. So I do want to talk about like how you see hope. Obviously, you wrote a book particularly for young girls all over the world to read. So I do want to end on a note of like how you see this can help transform sort of um, society. As you said, it's everywhere. It's not just in India. It's here. It's everywhere.
Yeah,
So
so I began writing "I Kick and I Fly," this novel that I was talking to you about. For I'm publishing this with Scholastic, and it's for young adults. And I began writing it when a girl who was 14 years old won a gold medal in karate, even though she'd grown up in the red light area. And after she won the gold medal, everything began to change for her. She began to do better in school. She had more self confidence. The community respected her, the village began to respect her, and that had a trigger effect on the entire community because they all began to fight then for their daughters, suddenly realizing it was possible. And so during lockdown, I finished the book because I had seen that sex trafficking was universal. It exists in every country, including in the United States. The average age of a girl being sold into prostitution in America is between 13 and 15. In India, it was 9 and 13. During COVID, kids were cut off from school and online, and sex traffickers were recruiting kids online, seasoning them, grooming them, and doing what? The same things that had happened to my kids in Bihar.
can you talk a
Body
little bit
shaming.
about that, about the online? Because I know you were part of a group of internet people discussing how traffickers work online, because I did not know about that at all, the way that they recruit.
Yeah. So I was, yeah, exactly.